This week on Arizona Illustrated, the opioid crisis close to home.
Some of the things she's chosen to do, I would have killed somebody if they had done them to her, but she did them to herself.
Fighting for equality.
It takes active awareness and attention in an ongoing way to maintain progress.
The desert oasis of Patagonia Lake.
You know, they said if you need water in Arizona, that this is the place to come.
And from the vault, Sabino Canyon. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. The opioid crisis in America has been declared an epidemic, and Arizona has not been spared. Since June 15th, more than 2,500 possible opioid overdoses have been reported across the state. And behind every statistic, there's a real person with a story.
From the very beginning, Jess was just an easy child. I think we put her in timeout once and put her in the corner, and she got a book and started reading, and I said, well, your timeout is up, and she looks at me and says, well, I'm not finished with the book, you know, so she just, I don't know, it was just easy. We have so many cards and letters and things that she wrote to us over the years. She was the perfect daughter for a very long time. She overdosed before her 16th birthday and was on life support for 6 or 7 days. And that was when we really realized she was in trouble.
Today, 91 more Americans will die from an opioid overdose. More people now die from overdoses than from traffic accidents. It is an epidemic. By the end of this week, in Arizona alone, about 200 people will overdose on opioids. More than 20 will lose their lives. Jess survived her first overdose, but she didn't stop using the drugs that almost killed her.
Morphine and Valium and oxycodone and basically anything they could get is what they were doing until the black tar came along, and then that was it. Once Jess discovered heroin, there was nothing else in her life, nothing.
I think it was like 870 BC were the first documents that show that people would take these and they would actually reach sort of what they called a higher state. And so we call it today euphoria, in which a person will feel good. When we do things that are exciting even in life or eating food, we get a little bit of dopamine, and that's our reward pathway. Opiates override this. Of course, now we don't need the food or anything else, we just need the opiate to get the dopamine release, and that's why they can become very addictive.
Once opioids hijack the brain's reward system, the brain adapts and starts making less of its own dopamine. As time goes on, opioid users need more and more of the drug just to feel normal. And that's when things get dangerous.
And at higher doses, it actually sort of decreases your own personal drive of breathing, and by decreasing that breathing, of course, that's how most people end up overdosing and dying.
Does that hurt?
It hurt. I could feel it. Right there, I can feel it, definitely.
Okay. And that made the pain worse?
Yes.
And that's the pain you're complaining about?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I actually remember when I was in medical school and we got lectures about pain management. One of the messages we were getting at the time is, don't worry, if a patient is in a pain, they will not get addicted to opioids if they are legitimately in pain. But that's because we didn't know better. It started in the mid to late 80s when certain pharmaceutical companies pushed for opioids really hard. I'm sure there was a component about just relieving the pain, but we cannot also ignore or completely discount the financial gains from selling opioids.
Prescription opioid sales quadrupled from 1999 to 2014, earning billions for pharmaceutical companies. BJ spent most of those years battling cancer and benefited from opioids' power to stop pain. Then she watched the drugs destroy her daughter's life.
Some of the things she's chosen to do, I would have killed somebody if they had done them to her, but she did them to herself. There's nobody to kill, you know. These are some of the things that Jess loved growing up. When I look at it, I see a young, happy, vibrant young woman doing all these things from the time she was born, and that person doesn't exist anymore.
BJ now has stage 4 bone cancer. In 2017, she spent more than 6 months out of contact with Jess, unsure if she'd live to see her daughter again. Then, one day in late summer, she got a call.
Want to know she was still alive was the big thing, and the second thing was I needed help. Couldn't wait any longer. So she's always been there. I just sucked it up, call one last time. I've been here 8 days. Prior to that, I was at one friend's house for 2 days, camping in the backyard. I was at a friend's trailer for about 4 days before that. And prior to that, I was staying behind an abandoned building at Grant and Swan for about 2.5 weeks. Right now, I'm trying to get into residential treatment. So fingers crossed, we'll see.
Without opioids or adequate treatment, Jess faces the dangers of withdrawal.
It affects the GI tract, it affects the temperature regulation of your body. The autonomic nervous system kind of regulates many of these things that we don't think about. So it just makes you kind of go through this process where you feel like you almost want to die.
I was sleeping on a sidewalk, 104-degree weather. I mean, rolling over and throwing up right there, being too weak to stand up. Even now, I still shake sometimes. My thoughts race. I have a hard time grabbing the simplest of words and putting a sentence together. And insomnia is kicking in, and that's the worst part. Last night was the first time I've slept in 4 days. They say you have to hit rock bottom. Yeah, I nailed mine real hard. That parachute did not open, and that sidewalk was my rock bottom. I've done this more than half my life. I have nothing to show for it but a criminal record and nothing. I want a life before it's too late.
In the grip of this epidemic, several states have declared public health emergencies, including Arizona.
We are back now with a deep dive into one of the most serious crises facing people in this country.
In opioid
people
addiction.
die every day from drug overdoses.
Coming from the streets, but from medicine cabinets all over America.
Training and tracking requirements have changed to keep better tabs on the crisis. New guidelines encourage physicians to curb their opioid prescriptions, and some new laws force them to.
We're not trained to be detectives, we're trained to heal. But we find ourselves in a situation that we have to take on that role. So it's a balance that we're trying to achieve between relieving pain and the welfare of the entire community.
It's unclear if these new steps to fight the opioid epidemic will be enough, especially if funding for the public health programs that are taking those steps gets cut.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's taking over. There are people that I've come across in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s that are using heroin. For $30 on the street, you know, for granny with, you know, arthritis, I mean, that could last her 3 to 4 weeks. There's no age, there's no race, there's no gender, There's no bounds with this drug.
How can we have this kind of problem and not address it? They're just walking into something that's so dark. I mean, you just have no idea how dark it is.
Hate crimes against the LGBTQ community are on the rise in places like Chechnya, Uganda, and Brazil. And according to the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, 2016 was the deadliest year on record for the LGBTQ community in the United States. Jewish history museums across the country are working to shine a light on human rights and social justice. As part of that effort, here in Tucson, the Holocaust History Center has staged an exhibition titled Invisibility and Resistance.
A few years ago, some people might have said, why another Holocaust history museum in this country? There are over 6. And the answer is because this past is always present. The dichotomy between past and present should be collapsed to understand that things don't happen in exactly the same way, but these forces that have been part of human history forever are still with us. We've developed it with a very particular sort of curatorial ethic, which is to present people as whole individuals beyond their persecution at a given time and place.
When you walk in here, something happens, whether you're Jewish or not, it doesn't really matter. This content around persecution, around dehumanization, around the denial of history, around the stripping of human rights through legislation, around military violence. There's no way that the Jewish community can just take ownership over this vast phenomenon that we have to struggle with as human beings.
We have a small space here dedicated to addressing contemporary human rights issues. It's a critical space, even an epicenter on this campus. We're now connecting the persecution and murder of gay German men during the era of the Third Reich to the ongoing persecution of LGBTQ people around the world today.
It's stunning. And I mean that in the way of, I came around the corner and felt stilled. Partially just to see trans and LGBT and queer people represented with so much care. And to know that part of the reason we have to have this particular exhibit is because the violence is not historical, but is ongoing.
It's titled Invisibility and Resistance, and we're intentionally countering the marginalization of LGBTQ people by making visible their histories, identities, and lived realities today.
Invisibility and resistance is something that is in conversation with everything else that's occurring in the Holocaust History Center.
This was a true community collaboration, and I was truly just one small part of it. I'm transgender. Documenting and being aware of the violence that is pervasive in the LGBT community has been a part of my life for a long time, and it's why I was brought into this project. Well, I identify as trans. I also identify as genderqueer. When folks ask what my pronoun preference is, I tend to go by he because, well, usually just because I have facial hair, and that's a default, which is great. I love that. But I always tell people I love to be referred to as hey girl, too. It makes me so happy. Things to keep in mind is that in 10 nations across the world, being LGBT is punishable by death. According to the Trans Murder Monitoring Project, a trans person is murdered every other day, or about 28 hours. Here in the US, that breaks down to about one trans person is murdered about every 2 weeks. There's never a moment in my day when I'm not trans. I feel like it influences my relationship to the world in really sometimes surprising, sometimes obvious ways. A lot of times I'm asked, well, what can cisgender folks or non-transgender folks do or straight allies do. And I cannot say it enough. LGBT folks cannot do this on our own. We've been doing it on our own. We truly need this to be your issue too.
That was the largest crowd we've ever held in this space. We counted 130 people. And what I loved about that crowd, which is something that we really want to hold here, is that it was incredibly intergenerational. It was also incredibly diverse. I think hope is that something very beautiful and liberating is ahead of us. And that if we suffer, and if we are oppressed, that we will do what is right in reacting to it.
The more I learned about history and the ways that trans people and queer people have existed and have found ways to live with a lot of like resilience and resistance is, to me, yeah, incredible cause for hope. Which is not to discount all of the ways that I feel like we may be trying to turn back time on some of that progress. I think this exhibit belongs here because I do think there's a shared root in that when we can other someone or a group of people, it makes them less human.
I think it's also part of the human condition to sort of get lulled into this idea of progress as sort of on cruise control. But it takes active awareness and attention in an ongoing way to maintain progress. And that's what this center hopes to do for this community.
Like what you see on Arizona Illustrated? Visit our webpage at azpm.org to watch and share videos from this episode. You'll also find stories from future programs, an easy way to submit your own story idea, an archive of past episodes of Arizona Illustrated. And you'll find everything you need to stay connected with public broadcasting in Southern Arizona. azpm.org. Southern Arizonans often travel to popular spots in California and Mexico to enjoy swimming, boating, fishing, or just being near water. But if it's water you want, why not stay a little closer to home? Next, we take you 80 miles south of Tucson to a desert oasis that may seem like a world away.
My name's Chris Conieris, and I'm here to have a fun day kayaking on the lake. I'm thrilled. The one thing we don't have in Tucson is water. So water sports, you often have to travel, and to have something less than 90 minutes away from Tucson makes it very accessible.
This is our first trip to the lake, and we'd heard about it from a few friends. You know, they said if you need water in Arizona, that this is the place to come. So it's pretty close to Sierra Vista, so it was an easy drive for us today. I love it. I'm actually really surprised. The pictures online don't do this place justice. It's very pretty. The slope from the hill down to the lake makes it very easy for us to sit up here as parents and, you know, enjoy the shade while the kids can go crazy in the water, and it feels very safe. You know, they're not too far. I've got a good view of everything around me, good view of the beach. It's very well set up.
The lake itself, surface acres, is 265 surface acres of actual surface water. The park itself is not too much bigger. It's with the campgrounds, it's almost 600 acres, the park itself. We also manage the state trust land which surrounds the park. That's over 2,000 acres. And then the Sonoyta Creek State Natural Area is several thousand acres. We have camping. We have 13 campsites out on the lake. The real popular ones, we have a big island and a smaller island that people like to use. Obviously, skiing, wakeboarding. We have several different species of fish. We have largemouth bass, we have channel cat and flathead cat. We also have bluegill, crappie. In the wintertime we stock with trout. And we have several different tournaments a year for the largemouth bass.
Quite a bit of bass here. It's a tough lake, but I've caught some good fish, 5-6 pound range in here, and yeah, it's just a great lake. It's just a fun lake. It's just tough. It's not a numbers lake where you're going to catch 10, 20 fish a day, but it is tough, and it has produced in the past. So.
And there's a lot of wildlife. We have everything from the big predator, the mountain lion, to the little ringtail cats, raccoon, skunk, all your normal stuff. One of the biggest draws we have here at the lake is our birding program. People come from miles and miles in other states and countries to see the elegant trogon. It's one of our favorite birds and most famous birds, along with the kingfisher, gnatcatchers. Over 200 different species of birds are found here at Patagonia Lake. So one of the interesting things about the park is that it was built over top of the New Mexico Patagonia Railroad. The railroad was constructed in the late 1800s and abandoned in the mid-1900s. It started in Benson, Arizona, traveled through Sonora, down through Patagonia into Mexico, all the way to Guaymas. The railroad was used for transport of cattle for the local ranchers, and also the local mines transported their ore to market.
I'm a Bob Regier, and my family's had the ranch about 100 years, and I've lived here about 40 years full-time now. Patagonia State Park was formed by these men, one of them my father, and they built a recreational lake. These are the documents to get the loan. They had to prove that the people in the area wanted to do this. So this is the signatures of people. I mean, done in 1966. It's very interesting who lived here then, and all of them signing these documents. I was about 20. I was at NAU. I didn't pay attention now. Later, I was overwhelmed that they did that, but all these men got together and did that. Something like that would never happen now. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, really, they had a different attitude. They just, let's build it. You know, we can do it. But one of the big problems they had, that road was dirt. And they realized they could never probably afford to pave that whole road. And that's one of the reasons I think they made the deal with the state to have a state park.
I got this little boat a few months ago, and it's quiet, you know, and it's relaxing, and you know, it's close to Tucson. It's not that far away, and it's definitely a totally different climate. It's usually a little bit cooler. It's fun, place to escape for a while and feel like you're maybe not in a desert.
For directions and more information, visit their website at azstateparks.com, Patagonia Lake. If you're looking for peace and quiet, visit during the week because weekends tend to be busy. As we say goodbye to this year's beautiful and dramatic monsoon, we look back at the summer of 2003 when we took a ride on the Sabino Canyon Tram to find out how fire, rain, and erosion wreaked havoc on the natural desert oasis nestled in the Catalina Mountains. From the vault.
The Sabino Canyon Tram is back in operation with the latest news from the tour guide.
A lot of ash in it, a lot of silt, yuck. Not good for us, but good for the soil. If you look to my right,
There is indeed a lot of ash and silt left on top of the Catalinas by the Aspen fire and carried down the canyon by monsoon rain. The stream is running clearer today, but it'll silt up again with another rain. It's all expected. Because of the ash, workers removed about 600 native Gila chub from the stream earlier and relocated the fish until it's safe.
It's
something that we anticipated once that fire came through and burned where it did. As it did, we knew we were going to be dealing with the effects for a long time.
But still, this is a heck of a summer, isn't it?
It is, and it ain't over yet.
Barricades block the road, so the Sabino tram stops short of the top. This is the reason why, and this mess had little to do with the Aspen fire.
This mess here came from an old roadbed that had been started decades ago that was going to go up further into the canyon, and it was just dirt, no asphalt surface on it. There was a microburst over that, a lot of rain, and it brought all of this mud and gravel right down the hillside into this area.
So did you just get lucky that it happened at the same time all the other...
Lucky isn't the word I would use.
And we got one crack in the wall.
Really?
Over here, yeah. It's about 12 inches long.
Wednesday, the mud was as high as the top of the restroom. Crews are slowly clearing it out, moving the soil from the structure, the walls, and the road. No one is sure how long it will take to get this area, Stop 9, open to the public, especially if it rains again. The public is welcome below the barricade, but Heidi Schul has some advice.
Be careful, watch your footing. There's a lot of rock and mud. I mean, we've cleared away a lot of it, but there's still areas where the sides of the roads have been eroded, and you know, it'd be easy to lose your footing. Also, watch what's going up in the mountains, because if we get a good storm up there, a lot of that water could come down through here, and before that happens, they'd want to be below the lowest bridge.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Next week, tune in to watch our special presentation, 100 Years in Space, Focusing the Universe.
Can we actually find the biosignatures of life and living worlds out there?
Desert Moon.
The thrill was to see the moon close up, closer, 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 closer as the spacecraft got closer to the impact site.
The Phoenix Mars mission.
Phoenix has left Canaveral Air Force Station. The next stop is Mars.
And OSIRIS-REx, images from space.
And liftoff of OSIRIS-REx.
I'm Tom McNamara. See you then.